European Coast Guard. Stop the machine.
In 2017, more than 150,000 refugees and migrants crossed into Europe, mostly via the Mediterranean to Italy. But the Greek islands also saw new arrivals.
We're prepared for anything. Nothing's changed here.
More than 3,000 people died trying to make it. The others ended up in so-called reception centres.
We feel like animals, not humans.
Italy and Greece cannot cope with the influx of refugees. The EU is also at a loss.
There's no notion that this is a joint European responsibility. The EU shouldn't just provide cash, it needs internal structures.
Instead, the EU is making controversial deals with third-party states.
The heads of government are trying to seal off the European Union to stop, if possible, any refugees reaching the EU.
Europe is divided over how to deal with the crisis.
The idea of solidarity remains a difficult issue.
Why can't the EU get the refugee crisis under control? On the Greek island of Samos, I join Frank Rogotti and his team from the German Federal Police, who've been patrolling the waters between Greece and Turkey for the European border agency Frontex. And when it comes to it, saving lives. What are you expecting when you set off?
We're prepared for anything. Nothing's changed here. There's still people smuggling and migrant boats arriving. We see it all.
Frank Rogotti switches off the lights so people smugglers can't spot his vessel. A Greek liaison officer is also on board. A radio message comes in almost straight away.
6-4. Frontex patrol boat. Get a position in the starboard side of an emergency boat. I'm conducting over.
Maybe this is a Turkish Coast Guard vessel operating close to our border and picking up some migrants. Please tell them we are on the way.
Charlie, we have to assist the Asoya. They have a boat with migrants and need our help.
The Asoya is a ship manned by Portuguese police also working for Frontex.
We've just had a call to say that the Portuguese patrol boat, which is also part of the operation here, has discovered a boat with migrants. Somehow the Turkish Coast Guard is also involved. We're heading over there to see what's up. The Portuguese have asked us for assistance.
In March 2016, the Turkish Coast Guard also boosted its presence in the waters between Turkey and the Greek islands to intercept refugees and migrants before they reach Europe and put off others trying to follow suit.
But who is this? There's one is going back, it's now in Turkey, and here's one moving to Greece.
Switch on our navigation lights.
Now the lights of the other boats have also come into sight.
Is that a vessel up front?
There are three.
Is the other one a migrant boat?
I'd say so.
Yeah, it's being lit up. We'll go in front of it.
A rubber dinghy crammed full of refugees has reached Greek waters. There are also children aboard. The police are trying to avert a disaster, but the refugees surrounded by police boats become panic-stricken and unwittingly set course for the treacherous cliffs.
They're holding up their children. It's far too dangerous for them to land.
They're not stopping.
Tell them we're Germans. They should stop the boat. It's that simple.
Stop the boat, ganz einfach, ganz einfach.
What idiots. They should stop.
Idioten, die sollen anhalten.
For the refugees, it's hard to tell exactly which Coast Guard they're dealing with.
They won't stop, but they are in danger if they come to the cliffs.
This is a European Coast Guard. Stop the machine. We want to help you. We are from Greece. Stop the machine.
European Coast Guard. Stop the machine. We want to help.
I'll have to stop, it's getting too shallow.
Many refugees can't swim and they can't see the cliffs in the dark. The police officers don't understand what they're shouting.
But what happens when they are onto the rocks and they embark? Okay, we just can watch them. I cannot go any closer to the coast, and Azoya cannot as well. So
watch until they.
We have to watch them, and otherwise we have to do a cliff rescue operation if there are some of them in the water.
There's a harbor entrance.
I hope it's the harbour. You know what they're like.
I think this is a hotel or something like this. We have just to take care of them that they don't jump into the water.
The refugees reach Europe via a hotel beach terrace.
It's sheer madness. They thought we were going to grab them and drag them back to Turkey. I don't know who tells them such nonsense, and they believe it. They're putting their lives in danger. They've just sunk their boat, and now they're climbing up there and storming their hotel. We've lit up their path with searchlights so that they can land safely and no one dies in the process. Now the boat has disappeared, and the people too. We've just radioed our colleagues from the Frontex Land Border Patrol. We've told them to pick up the people and bring them to safety. Is this really necessary?
For now, the refugees' journey has ended in a camp near Samos town. Under EU pressure, Greece has created so-called hotspots on the islands to process new arrivals. This is where the asylum applications are assessed. In March 2016, Turkey and the EU signed a controversial deal according to which Ankara agreed to take back anyone who had managed to cross into Europe from Turkey. This led to a significant drop in newcomers. The number of new arrivals fell from over 200,000 in October 2015 to under 2,000 in March 2017, but since July they've been on the rise again. This camp was intended to accommodate 800, but by late September 2017 it housed 2,400. We are refused access. No one here wants the film teams to record the chaos. Down at the harbour, I meet refugees who complain about conditions in the camp.
Our situation is difficult. Down here, we see how good life can be, but up there, it's like a prison. We feel like wild animals, not humans. You should come and see. The children freeze at night, and we can't get any blankets for them.
The tiny tents don't protect us from the sun or from the cold at night. There are 4 of us sharing a blanket, and there's often no water.
The UN Refugee Agency confirmed that blankets are not being properly distributed and that water supplies are frequently interrupted for hours. Aid workers are concerned about outbreaks of infectious diseases. The photographs the camp dwellers give me show families with small children also living in tents and makeshift shelters. In 2015, the EU pledged to help Greece and Italy. The plan was to redistribute some 98,000 asylum seekers among other EU member states, but well under a third of that number had actually been relocated by autumn 2017. The Greeks feel let down and have barely drawn on extra EU funds to expand the camps and improve conditions. Most Greek islanders oppose bigger and more permanent facilities. They don't see why they should shoulder the EU's refugee problem alone. This local mayor no longer believes the relocation system will be implemented.
The islands of the northern Aegean cannot stand anymore to have hotspots because accommodation has prerequisites and conditions. Psychologists, doctors, administration, Coast Guard, policemen. I think that some member states are covered, in quotation marks, behind this situation. not accepting refugees, not fulfilling the agreement that was signed.
A strait just over a kilometre wide separates the Greek island Samos from Turkey. In 2016, the Turkish Coast Guard intercepted almost 40,000 refugees and took them back to Turkey, part of the deal between Brussels and Ankara. I want to find out how refugees are being treated in Turkish camps. I'm given access to a facility that Chancellor Merkel visited, a model camp funded by the EU. But I'm not allowed to speak freely to the refugees. Instead, the Turkish authorities introduced me to a Syrian couple who have been living here in container accommodation with their 3 children for the last 5 years.
I used to work in construction in Syria as an electrician. There's a lot of building going on in Turkey at the moment, and I've also found work as an electrician here.
We have a good life here. We have everything we need. We're not lacking anything. There's a school and a kindergarten for our children.
Brussels has promised to transfer a total of €6 billion to Turkey to help the 3.5 million refugees there. As well as money, Europe has offered an exchange deal. Turkey takes back any asylum seekers who get to Greece, and in return for each Syrian returned to Turkey, Europe has promised to accept an additional Syrian from Turkey. However, by autumn 2017, the EU had officially resettled some 11,000 people from Turkey, while only 216 had been sent back, and Greece saw 21,000 new arrivals. Human rights organizations continue to oppose the return of asylum seekers and refugees to a country where they say they can't be given effective protection. But in late September, the Greek Supreme Court upheld a ruling that Turkey was a safe third country, allowing forcible returns. Activists say that this is a breach of their right to apply for asylum in the EU. The deal only creates losers, says Turkish professor of medicine Cem Terzi, who helps refugees wanting to leave Turkey.
The deal between the EU and Turkey has turned Turkey into an open prison. Under 10% of refugees are housed in camps. Most refugee children don't attend school, and that hinders women from integrating into society. Most adults, in fact, don't speak any Turkish at all. If they do find a job, most don't have any kind of legal protection, pension rights, or insurance. They are quite simply being exploited.
Until 2016, new arrivals and people smugglers met openly in the Basmane district of Izmir. But since the EU-Turkey deal, this is the end of the line for thousands of Syrians. Adnan Cherkes and his family were stranded here after fleeing the war in Syria. The family of 5 now live in an old shack.
Welcome to our home. This is where we sleep. We've turned the couch into 3 beds. The others sleep on the floor and use the cushions as their mattress. We live in this small apartment. It's the will of Allah. And that is our kitchen.
Their son Chumar also lives here. Like the rest of the family, he was traumatized by the war and fears he was the victim of a poison gas attack.
I don't work. I sit around because I've got a bad hand.
Did you go to the doctors?
Yes, but I only have a paper ID. I don't have a proper ID card. The doctor told me that I had to wait until I had one. Otherwise, he wouldn't get paid.
But no one can tell Chumar when his documents will arrive. At least his sister Kefe has found a job. She helps out in a clothing factory.
No one is supporting us, and I can't do it alone. As soon as my son is old enough, I'll find him a job. He'll have to help. For me, it's already clear that my son won't go to school. He'll work as soon as he's a bit older.
No matter how much my daughter works, she can't earn enough to support us all.
She shows me just how many tablets her husband has to take.
We want to go to another country where the boy and his father will get treatment.
The EU-Turkey deal was intended to provide a breathing space so long-term solutions could be found. But in Turkey, the agreement has sparked despair among refugees, and in Greece, it has sparked anger and chaos. The German government's plan was largely the brainchild of think tank founder Gerald Knaus.
The most astonishing thing about this crisis, from the outset, was how important European institutions panicked and made pledges only as a result of pressure from the public and extremely high statistics. Just when it looked like the crisis might be under control again, interest in solving concrete problems seemed to start waning again. The problem is that we currently have, in principle, an unreformed EU asylum and border system. We now have an EU border and Coast Guard agency, but we still lack the ability to quickly process asylum applications. We have the Dublin system, which basically means that everyone who arrives in Greece has to stay there, and that provides little incentive for the Greek authorities to improve the conditions for refugees.
EU interior ministers have been squabbling over reforms to the Dublin regulation for well over a year now. It stipulates that the EU state on which asylum seekers first set foot has to process their asylum claims. At the EU Interior Ministers' Conference in October, I asked the German Interior Minister why asylum seekers are not being relocated to all member states. You've been trying to negotiate a new asylum system for over a year. Why the lack of progress?
Solidarity continues to be a tricky issue, and it's important that the refugees who are allocated to a certain European state don't simply move to another country because the conditions might be better. We call that secondary migration, and we have to make more headway there. We still aim to wrap things up as soon as possible. The heads of government have given us until the end of 2017 to make headway. We're also striving for that, but substance is more important than speed.
But it's a catastrophe on the Greek islands. Why aren't you doing anything?
Well, that's primarily a job for the Greek authorities, and if Greece needs support, they'll get it.
Everyone just shifts the blame onto the others. Yet the EU Commissioner for Migration, Dimitris Avramopoulos, provided European interior ministers with proposals on how to reform the common asylum system back in 2016. The idea is to redistribute asylum seekers across all member states. But the Greek EU official was unable to push through this pan-European solution, and his country is unable to cope alone.
Meanwhile, the situation of the refugees on the Greek island is horrible again. Mr. de Maizière said this is a problem of Greece. Is he right?
It is true to say that the Minister of Migration of Greece today informed us that there is a worrying increase of arrivals during the last 2 weeks. He even said that the numbers are even higher compared to what's happening in Italy. So we want to support, we want to help. And as our President said 2 minutes ago, we are willing to contribute in finding a solution because the EU-Turkey statement should continue delivering as it is happening during the last 1 year and a half.
So politicians are still clinging to the deal with Ankara. Does that mean it should serve as a blueprint for agreements with other third-party states? Italy, summer 2017. The German frigate Mecklenburg-Vorpommern made an unscheduled stop in the Sicilian town of Augusta. On board, refugees from Libya rescued by the German armed forces, whose real mission it is to arrest people smugglers. Instead, they've come across the most vulnerable people of all, children.
There are almost 100 men. We only have 5 women with us and just over 50 children who are traveling alone.
50 unaccompanied minors.
Yes.
Is that a new experience, or is it normal to find so many children traveling alone?
In principle, it's something you can expect to encounter. But I have to say that these children are always passed along from one adult to the next, but they don't have any proper relatives or parents with them.
Left to deal with the migrant problem alone, Italy approached Libya's UN-recognized government and offered to help it build up a coast guard which would return migrants to Libyan soil. It led to a drop in new arrivals.
Over recent months and years, we've seen the situation here change with every season. It's very dynamic. We cannot depend on the situation remaining stable. Today, we're expecting a lot of refugees. And over the last few days, 700 people were picked up by the Libyan Coast Guard and returned to Libya.
They come from Senegal, Chad, Congo, Nigeria and Ivory Coast. Very few have a realistic chance of being granted asylum. Nonetheless, most will remain in Italy for a long time. Many don't have passports, making deportation practically impossible. Some 75% of all migrants and refugees arriving in the EU in 2017 came to Italy via Libya. In the Sicilian city of Palermo, I meet a group of refugees from Somalia. They're relieved to have escaped the horrors of Libya.
What experience did you make in Libya?
For me, the bad time for my life in Libya, because before I'm in Somalia, there is war, there is killing for every day and something like that. But there's no one who kidnapping you and asking for you for money. If you're not bad, you will drink water with, what can I say, with gas, like benzene. And sometimes it's killing you if you don't pay for the money.
The EU has backed Italy's initiative to help Libya intercept the refugees. But while the situation in Italy has eased, chaos and despair have increased in North Africa. Sicily's biggest refugee camp, Caramineo, now has spare capacity. Palermo's mayor has frequently stood up for the rights of refugees in the past. He blames the agreement with Libya on European ignorance.
Europe has to show solidarity. And if it isn't about solidarity, I ask myself what Europe stands for. If the EU doesn't define itself through the recognition of human rights, then it's just a financial union. And if it's just a financial union, I don't need it. I'd rather expel states from the EU who don't respect the rights of migrants than send migrants away.
In June 2017, a UN report once again highlighted the fact that migrants were being subject to grave human rights abuses in Libya, including executions, torture, deprivation of food and water, and enslavement. Nonetheless, Italy continues to pursue the agreement with Libya and even got backing from the European heads of state and government. They met with opposition from some members of the European Parliament who wanted an internal European solution for the problem. I spoke to the co-chair of the Greens in the European Parliament, Ska Keller, and asked her the reason for this approach.
The heads of state and government are trying to seal off the European Union to stop any refugees getting in. It's dressed up as tackling the root causes of the problem. But the refugees still exist. They just don't get as far as Europe, but end up stranded in Lebanon or Turkey or wherever. And we, the EU, are working with third-party states who prevent them from getting here.
The real crisis began in 2015 and still nothing has happened. What's your view on that?
We've just voted in favor of a report that proposes a radical rethink. The Parliament is calling for a fair redistribution of refugees across all member states. All member states have to take part, and of course it's very important to consider existing family ties, for example, to help with integration.
Parliament has decided, but why have no resolutions been passed?
We've clearly got a massive problem in the national seats of government. European migration policy is languishing because member states aren't prepared to work together and show solidarity with one another and with the refugees, with people seeking protection.
Decisive action is needed from European heads of government to forge a new EU migration policy. They've been looking for solutions for well over a year, but countries like Poland and Hungary still refuse to accept asylum seekers from Italy or Greece. So Eurosceptic governments are calling the shots in Brussels. At the EU's Directorate General for Migration and Home Affairs, civil servants are quietly working behind the scenes, seeking solutions that all member states can agree to. What's the main sticking point? I asked the head of the Directorate, Matthias Rüther.
We have to make sure that those really in need of protection get that protection. Secondly, that all migrants who have no right to stay in Europe are deported. But thirdly, that we exploit the great possibilities of boosting legal migration.
Isn't there a danger that precisely those countries who haven't shown solidarity in the past will determine the pace of migration policy?
That's why, as far as solidarity goes, we'll probably have to build compromises so that ideally all, or at least a great number of member states, will be able to agree to them. Currently, it's like trying to align a Rubik's Cube. I think that we've now got all the pieces lined up and ready to turn in the right direction. But we need the right backing from our bosses.
You haven't got that.
We do have it from most of them, but I'd like to get it from a few others.
At the meeting in Brussels in October 2017, the big question of how Europe should deal with refugees in the future remained unanswered. Heads of government were only able to agree on short-term assistance, for example in supporting Italy's deal with Libya. The president of the EU Council justified the slim pickings because of Europe's need to remain united.
We have just concluded our discussion about migration and the need to help Italy manage the central Mediterranean route. Leaders agreed to offer Prime Minister Gentiloni stronger support for Italy's work with the Libyan authorities. Additionally, leaders decided to come back to the issue of Dublin reform in December with a view to reaching a consensus in the first half of 2018. And I would like to state very clearly that as long as I am here, I will be the guardian of European unity, because unity is in fact our most important strength.
Blocked by national interests, the EU is unable to make headway. Instead, it has postponed a decision once again, and refugees are paying the price.